Hello to everyone listening from around the world. Today's account comes from Randy McCullers, 63, who shared what happened when his son-in-law invited his parents to move into Randy's lake house, and what the cameras Randy installed recorded over the next few weeks. This account has been dramatized to protect privacy. AI narration is used throughout. The experience it describes is real, 63 years old, and I had finally earned the right to do absolutely nothing. That's not laziness. That's justice. 31 years running a contracting crew across East Tennessee, busting concrete in July heat, framing houses in January frost, training men half my age who thought they knew everything and proved daily that they didn't. I'd earned every callus, every bad knee, every morning where I needed 2 minutes just to straighten up fully before I could walk to the bathroom. When I retired, I didn't want a cruise, didn't want to golf. I wanted a lake house on Norris Lake, a dock, a fishing rod, and maybe 30 feet between me and my nearest neighbor. I wanted to watch the sun come up over the water with a cup of coffee and hear nothing but birds. I bought the place in March. White house, green shutters, wraparound porch, 2.5 acres of Tennessee hillside sloping down to the water. My buddy Paul from the old crew came up the first weekend, sat on the dock with me, cracked open 2 Budweisers at 8 in the morning, and said, "Randy, you did it, man. You actually did it." I had. What I didn't know yet was that somebody else had plans for my paradise, and they'd been making those plans for a lot longer than I had. Let me tell you about Jane first, because she's the reason everything matters. Jane McCuller, my wife of 41 years, is the most beautiful woman I have ever known. Still is. She's got this laugh that sounds like wind chimes if wind chimes were sarcastic, and for 4 decades she laughed at every dumb thing I said and made me feel like the funniest man alive. We raised our daughter Laura in a 3-bedroom house in Knoxville, drove her to softball practice and piano lessons and every school play she was in, even the one where she played a tree. 3 years ago, Jane started forgetting things. Little things at first, where she put her keys, what she'd had for breakfast. Then bigger things. Then, one Tuesday morning, she looked at me across the kitchen table and said, "I'm sorry, do I know you?" And my entire world collapsed into about 4 square inches. Dementia. Early onset. Aggressive. By the time the specialists were done explaining it, I understood that I was going to lose my wife one memory at a time, and there wasn't a thing on earth I could do to stop it. She's at Meadowbrook Care Center now, 40 minutes from the lake house. I visit every single day. Some days, she knows me, grabs my hand, calls me Randy Bear, which is a nickname she gave me in 1987, and which I would rather die than have repeated publicly. Some days, she doesn't know me from Adam and asks if I'm there to fix the heat. I sit with her anyway. I'll sit with her every day until one of us is gone, and I don't want to talk about that part. The lake house was supposed to be my anchor, the place I came home to after visiting Jane, the place that kept me sane. It almost became something else entirely. My daughter Laura is 34, and she is wonderful in the way that good people are wonderful. She doesn't make a big show of it. She just shows up. She visited Jane with me twice a week and never complained once. She called me every Sunday evening. She made me a lasagna once a month and drove it 2 hours because she knew I wasn't eating right. I love that kid more than anything. Her husband, Drake Aldridge, was a different story. I tried to like Drake. Lord knows I tried. He's one of those men who walks into a room and immediately starts rearranging the furniture of it. Not literally, but socially. He's always got a plan, always got an angle, always got one eye on the exit and the other on what you're worth. He sells commercial real estate in Knoxville, and he is very good at it, which I think says something specific about his particular combination of charm and ethics. He had these parents, Frank and Norma Aldridge. Frank was a retired insurance man from Chattanooga. Quiet, watchful, the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, just strategic. Norma made casseroles and smiled constantly and reminded me of every villain in every movie who gets revealed in the 3rd act. I didn't have evidence back then. Just a contractor's gut, built from 3 decades of reading people before I hired them. My gut has a very good track record. It was a Sunday dinner in late September, about 6 weeks after I moved into the lake house. Laura had come up with Drake to see the place, and I'd made ribs on the grill, And it was a good day right up until it wasn't. We were sitting on the porch watching the sun go down over the water, and Drake set down his sweet tea and used his real estate voice. The smooth one, the one that slides into a room before the rest of him does, and said, "So, Randy, we've actually been thinking. You've got all this space up here." "Yep," I said, "and, I mean, it's just you rattling around in all these rooms. Just how I like it." He laughed the way people laugh when they're not really laughing. "Well, here's the thing. Mom and Dad are looking to downsize. Dad's knees are shot, and the Chattanooga place is just too big for them now. And we thought, I mean, Laura and I thought." He glanced at Laura, who was looking at the water, and not at me, which I noted, "that maybe Frank and Norma could come stay up here for a while, just until they figure out their next move." The lake was glassy and orange in the evening light. A heron stood on my dock like it owned it. I let about 10 seconds pass. "How long is a while?" I said. "Oh, you know, open-ended. Just until they move in," I said. "Well, it's not Drake." I looked at him. "You're asking me if your parents can move into my house." He smiled. "We'd all be contributing. It wouldn't be a burden. It'd be nice for you to have company. Honestly, given..." He stopped himself, but not fast enough. "Given Jane," I finished for him. The porch got real quiet. Laura finally turned from the water and looked at me. And her face said I didn't know he was going to say it like that, and I believed her. What her face also said underneath that was, "But I knew he was going to ask." That part stung. "I'll think about it," I said. Drake nodded, like that meant yes. It did not mean yes. What Drake didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I had started getting a bad feeling about him several months earlier. Nothing I could name, nothing specific, just that contractor's gut, whispering. So I'd called my old friend McCall. McCall spent 20 years as an investigator for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation before he retired and started doing private work. He is the single most methodical human being I have ever met, and I have enormous respect for methodical people. I told him I had a son-in-law I wanted run through the system. Nothing dramatic, just a full background, financial history, anything public record. Told him I'd pay his rate. No rush. McCall called me back 6 weeks later with a voice like a man reading a weather report. Calm. Even. Totally unbothered by what he was saying. "Your son-in-law's been brokering a deal with a developer out of Nashville," he said. "Commercial developer named Christabel something. Company called Lakeshore Partners LLC. They've been mapping parcels around Norris Lake for 18 months, looking for consolidation opportunities, land that can be assembled into a resort development. Minimum 50 acres. I looked out at my dock. "How much land do I have?" I asked, even though I knew. 2.5 acres isn't enough on its own," McCall said. "But you're adjacent to a preserved parcel that reverts to private sale in 18 months. Combined, it's just over 60 acres. And the geography, the cove, the water access, Randy, a developer could put something significant there." "What's the land worth to a developer?" There was a pause. "Rough estimate? North of 4 million. I sat with that for a moment. "And Drake's involved?" "He's the listing broker on the deal. Has been for 14 months. 14 months. Laura and Drake had been married for 3 years. He had been married to my daughter for 3 years, eating my Thanksgiving turkey, and watching my football games, and calling me Randy like we were friends. And for 14 of those months he had been quietly positioning himself around my land, like a chess player setting up a checkmate." "One more thing," McCall said. "Go ahead." "His parents. Frank and Norma Aldridge. Frank did insurance, like you said, but he also did 2 years probation in 2009. Financial fraud. Small scale, but these aren't unsophisticated people, Randy." "No," I said. "No, they're not." The heron came back to my dock. Stood there patient as patience itself. I understood that bird completely. I called Drake the next morning and told him Frank and Norma were welcome to come stay. He was so pleased he could barely talk normally. "Randy, that's really generous. I think you're going to enjoy the company, honestly, and..." "No need to oversell it, Drake," I said. "Guest room's ready. They can come whenever. What Drake didn't know, and would not know for the next 8 weeks, was that in the 48 hours between his porch speech and that phone call, I had made 3 calls of my own. One to McCall, one to my attorney, a sharp woman named Dorothy who had been handling McCuller family legal matters for 20 years and who had, in that time, never once lost. And one to my buddy Mike, who had spent 15 years in commercial security systems before he retired and who owed me a favor from a home renovation I'd done at cost back in 2019. Mike drove up on a Wednesday. We spent 2 days working while I told Frank and Norma the house was getting a security upgrade, which was not a lie. 14 cameras, interior and exterior, the living room, the kitchen, the dock, the driveway, the back porch. One in the hallway smoke detector that I am particularly proud of because it looks absolutely nothing like a camera. Audio enabled throughout. Remote access on my phone and tablet. Cloud stored, backed up, off-site, time-stamped. Mike showed me the app, made sure I knew how to work everything, clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Randy, I don't know what's going on here, but whoever you're watching better hope they behave themselves." "I doubt they will," I said. He nodded. "Good luck." Frank and Norma arrived on a Friday with 4 large suitcases and the energy of people who were not planning to leave soon. Frank was a tall man who stood slightly too straight, like a man performing the concept of trustworthiness. Norma was small and neat and brought me a peach cobbler, which I will admit was excellent, and which I ate with the complicated emotion of a man who knows he's being played but also genuinely likes peach cobbler. "Randy," Frank said, standing in my living room, looking around at the ceilings, the views, the lay of the land. "This is a spectacular place." "It is," I said. "You've really done well for yourself." "I worked hard," I said simply. "Of course you did." He smiled. "Of course." I smiled back. Behind the smoke detector, the camera blinked silently. Week 1 was almost boring. Frank walked the property a lot. I watched him on my tablet while I sat in the parking lot of Meadowbrook after visiting Jane, eating a sandwich, and studying the footage with the same focus I used to give to blueprints. He walked the fence lines. He walked down to the water. He stood at the property corners and looked at his phone, and I watched him photograph the boundary markers 3 separate times. Taking an interest in property lines, I said quietly to my sandwich. The sandwich had no comment. I noted the dates. I noted the times. I saved the clips. Week 2, Norma made her move. I had gone into town, actually driven to the end of the road, parked behind a stand of trees and hiked back through the woods to a spot where I could see the house and also check the live feed. Norma waited exactly 11 minutes after my truck disappeared. Then she went through my mail. Not casually, methodically. She spread it on the kitchen counter, photographed each piece with her phone, stacked it back. She was looking for something specific. When she found my property tax statement, the one that listed the parcel ID and assessed acreage, she photographed it 3 times from different angles. Then she called Drake. I had the audio. "I got the parcel number," she said, "and the tax ID. Drake, honey, it matches what you had." "Good," he said. "Good. That's the one. Don't leave anything out." "I'm not stupid, Drake." "I know, Mom. I know. I saved the audio file. I labeled it. I made a note in the document I'd started keeping, which was organized with a precision that would have made McCall proud. That night at dinner, Norma made her peach cobbler again, and I told her it was the best thing I'd ever eaten. And she patted my hand and told me I was sweet. I agreed with her. Week 3 brought a visitor. I was on the dock, fishing, when a black SUV pulled up the driveway. A woman got out, mid-40s, dark blazer, the deliberate walk of someone billing by the hour. She introduced herself to Frank, who came out to meet her, as Luna. She worked for Lakeshore Partners. I know that because she handed Frank a business card that my dock camera read cleanly from 14 feet away. Good resolution on those cameras. Mike does not cut corners. Frank gave her a full tour of the house and property. He introduced himself as a co-owner. I watched the whole thing from the dock. I was holding my fishing rod. I may have been the calmest I'd been in years, which tells you something about what happens to a man when he stops being surprised. Luna left after 45 minutes. Frank came down to the dock, hands in his pockets, looking pleased. "Beautiful day," he said. "Perfect," I said, and reeled in my line. Week 4 was when Drake got careless. He called his father from the driveway. Probably thought he was out of earshot. Definitely did not account for the exterior microphone on the motion-activated camera mounted under the porch eave. I was watching from my bedroom window, with the volume on my tablet turned low. "Listen," Drake said, pacing, "Christabel needs confirmation by the end of the month. If we can establish residency, Mom and Dad as co-occupants, we build a claim. It doesn't have to hold forever, just long enough to cloud the title while we structure the deal." He paused, listening. "I know he seems... Look, Dad, the man visits his wife at the memory care place every single day. He's not here half the time. He's distracted. He's grieving. He won't catch on." Pause. "He's a retired contractor, not a lawyer. He doesn't know what to look for." I set the tablet down on the bed. I looked at the ceiling for a moment. A retired contractor, not a lawyer. No, I was not a lawyer. That part was true. But I was a man who had spent 31 years managing projects, reading contracts, spotting structural weaknesses before buildings went up, catching problems before they became catastrophes. I was a man whose wife was disappearing, one memory at a time, and who had chosen to remain functional and sharp and present rather than dissolving into grief. I was a man with 14 cameras, a documented attorney, and more patience than Drake Aldrich had years on this earth. I picked up my phone and called Dorothy. "They're moving into phase 2, I said. "Then we move too." She said, "I'll have the trust documents ready by Thursday." Dorothy Callahan had been practicing property law in Tennessee for 26 years. She is 5 feet 2 inches tall, weighs maybe 115 pounds, and has personally destroyed 4 separate attempts to defraud her clients, 2 of which went to trial. She presented the irrevocable trust documentation to me on a Thursday morning at the Lake House kitchen table while Frank and Norma were out shopping. "Once this is filed," she said, tapping the papers, "the property transfers to the trust. You remain the sole beneficiary and trustee. No residency claim, no adverse possession argument, no title cloud. None of it touches the asset inside the trust. It's clean. How fast can we file? End of business today." I signed where she told me to sign. "One more thing," Dorothy said, closing her briefcase. "The audio, the property photography, the tour with the Lakeshore representative. All documented," I said. "Time-stamped, cloud-backed, organized by date." She looked at me the way people look at you when you exceed their expectations. "Randy, you would have made a good attorney." "I would have been miserable," I said. "But thank you." Week 5 was the one that broke my heart a little. Norma sat down at the kitchen table while I was having my morning coffee. A Tuesday, and she slid a document across the table. Her face was arranged into something she probably thought looked like kindness. "Randy," she said, "Frank and I have been talking, and we just want to make sure that you know as things progress with Jane," she paused delicately, "that you have people around you. Real support." "I do," I said. Of course you do. It's just, this document is just a letter of intent. Informal. Basically just saying that we intend to maintain the residence and help cover costs. It doesn't mean anything legally, it's just..." "Norma," I said. She stopped. "What exactly does this document do?" She blinked. "It's just, I went to sleep in this house last night. I woke up in this house this morning. I've owned this house since March." I looked at her steadily. "Are you asking me to sign something that suggests you live here?" The smile faltered. "Just slightly. It's just a formality. I'm not going to sign it," I said. "But thank you for the coffee cake last week. It was really something." I watched her carry that document back to her bedroom, and I made a note of the attempt. The camera in the hallway smoke detector had caught the whole exchange, crystal clear. That night I called Paul and told him all of it, and Paul, who is the best audience in the world, laughed until he coughed. "She brought a document to breakfast?" he said. "To breakfast. Randy, my God. I know." "What did you say?" I said thank you for the coffee cake. He lost it completely. I needed that laugh more than I'd admitted to myself. Some nights you just need to laugh at the absurdity of the world before it crushes you. Week 6. Drake drove up on a Saturday with a bottle of bourbon. and the energy of a man who thought he was about to win. He grilled steaks. He was generous and warm, and told stories about real estate deals like a man who has confused his professional identity with his character. Frank and Norma sat on either side of me on the porch, like bookends. After dinner, when the bourbon was half gone and the sun was all the way down, Drake leaned back in his chair and said, "Randy, I gotta say, I'm glad this worked out. I think this is good for everyone." "Me too," I said. "Mom and Dad are happy you've got company." He gestured at the dark water below. "Beautiful place to see out retirement." 6 more weeks, Frank said, almost to himself, then catching himself. 6 more weeks of good weather, I mean. I looked at him. He looked at the water. 6 more weeks, I repeated. The camera on the dock post tucked behind the light fixture caught everything. The whole conversation, the whole evening. Drake raising his glass. Frank's slip. The sound of the water and the frogs and the quiet smugness of 3 people who thought they were close to something. They were close to something. All right, just not what they thought. That night, after Frank and Norma went to bed and Drake started to follow, I said, "Drake, sit down a minute." He sat. "I want to show you something." I set my tablet on the porch table and pulled up the camera app. 14 feeds, arranged in a grid. He stared at the screen. He stared at it for a long time. "That's," he started. "The kitchen," I said, pointing. "The dock. The driveway? That's where you made that phone call in week 4, by the way. Good camera, that one. Audio's real clean." His face had gone the color of old concrete. "Randy, I've been doing this since before your parents arrived," I said. "Every conversation, every phone call you made on my property. Norma's mail situation. Frank's meeting with Luna from Lakeshore Partners." I paused. She seemed sharp, by the way. Too bad she's going to be very embarrassed when this deal falls apart. "This is," he scrambled. "This is an invasion of—" "It's my house," I said. "My property. 14 cameras, all permitted, all legal under Tennessee law. Which, I know you think I'm just a retired contractor, so you might not know this, does not require consent for surveillance on your own property." Silence. The frogs kept going. Water kept lapping the dock. "You used my daughter," I said. "I want you to understand that I know that, and that Laura doesn't know yet, but she will. And that part, Drake, that part is going to come from me, directly. Carefully, because she deserves that." He opened his mouth. "Closed it. The property transferred to an irrevocable trust 4 weeks ago," I said. "Dorothy filed it the same day Norma photographed my tax statement. There's nothing to claim. There's no title to cloud. The deal with Christabel at Lakeshore is based on access to land that I control completely, and will never ever be accessible to you." I picked up my coffee mug. I also forwarded the audio files to McCall, who is consulting with a colleague at the Tennessee Attorney General's office about the fraud angle. "I don't know if anything comes of that. Not really my department." Drake sat very still. "I think," I said, "that you and your parents should probably start packing in the morning." They were gone by noon the next day. Frank carried his own bags to the car without making eye contact. Norma tried one more time, told me that I'd misunderstood everything, that they were just trying to help, that I was a lonely old man who was going to regret this. She said it with the smile still in place. And I'll give her this. She held it all the way to the car. I stood on the porch and watched the car go down the driveway, through the trees, and out of sight. Then I went inside and called Laura. That conversation was the hardest one I've ever had, harder than the dementia diagnosis. Different kind of hard. She cried. She asked if I was sure, and I told her yes. And I told her I had everything recorded. And I told her that I loved her, and that none of this changed anything between us, and that Drake was the problem, not her. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Daddy, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what." "I know, baby," I said. "I'm sorry." "Don't you dare be sorry," I said. "You didn't do anything." She came up the following weekend, alone, and we sat on the dock with 2 cups of coffee and watched the morning come over the water. and didn't talk a whole lot. And that was exactly right. That was 4 months ago. Laura is handling it with the grace I raised her to have. The marriage is a separate conversation, one that's hers to navigate, and I'm staying in my lane. McCall's referral to the AG's office produced some interesting follow-up conversations that I'm not at liberty to discuss, but let's say the people at Lakeshore Partners had a confusing autumn. Jane had a good day last Thursday. She called me Randy Bear. She asked me if I'd fixed the thing with the dock, which is something she's been asking about since 2019, and which I have fixed 3 separate times to her ongoing skepticism. I told her yes. She told me not to be a smartmouth. I told her I'd try. I drive the 40 minutes there and 40 minutes back every day, and I sit with her as long as they'll let me. And when I come home, the lake is there, and the dock is there, and the heron is usually somewhere on the property, standing in the shallows with the patience of something ancient. Nobody is in my guest room. Nobody is photographing my boundary markers. Nobody is on the phone with a developer from Nashville. It is quiet. It is mine. And if you want to come for it, if you are Drake Aldridge or Frank Aldridge or anyone who has ever made the specific mistake of looking at a grieving old man and seeing an easy mark, I want you to know something. 63 years old. 31 years reading structures, spotting weaknesses, knowing where things are going to fail before they do. 14 cameras. And all the time in the world. Come on up. The dock's real nice this time of year. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more family-centered accounts like this.